Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is your other illuminating host.
Brian, hi, how's it going?
Not too bad, Brian, how are you doing? Lighting up my life as usual.
Yeah, like not too bad. Distracted by a work thing in my brain, and that's, how my brain is like 90% of the time anyway. So, should we jump into the Buffy Ann summary?
Sure.
Great. Okay, so this is an unusual one in terms of the writing for the episode. So I'm now thinking, there's something I should have looked up and I didn't. But anyway, so we're talking this week about conversations with dead people, not conversations with friends. I need to stop making this mistake. Conversations with Friends is a Sally Rooney novel, who's an Irish author who just released a new book, which I am listening to at the moment. So that's probably what's on my mind. Anyway, it was first aired on November 12th, 2002, which is quite relevant. And it was directed by Nick Mark, who last directed Beneath You. And it was written by, officially, it was written by Jane Espenson and Drew Goddard. However, it's notable because they're, in the commentary on the episode, they note that, Margie Noxon and Joss Whedon also wrote sections of it. So I know that this episode was nominated for a Hugo Award and maybe won a Hugo. I think it won a Hugo. I'll check my notes. But I think it won a Hugo Award. And I believe the Hugo Award went to the four of them. I might be wrong there, though. So the way it's been explained is that Espenson wrote the Dawn scenes. Goddard wrote the Geeks. Whedon wrote Buffy's scenes, and Noxon wrote Willow's scenes, and Nixon and Whedon apparently weren't credited because they were executive producers, so it was like they kind of eschewed a writing credit on the basis that they were kind of already credited as executive producers. And here's your Buffy Ann summary. Buffy Fights is analysed by and slays Webbs, a former student at Sunnydale High and a psychologist, now a vampire. Willow is visited by Cassie's ghost and told to give up magic and kill herself if she wants Tara. Dawn fights a demon and sees Joyce, who warns her against Buffy. Spike kills and sires a woman. Webbs mentions that Spike sired him. Jonathan and Andrew return to Sunnydale. Warren's ghost orders Andrew to kill Jonathan on a seal in the school basement. So yeah, we kind of said before the episode we probably won't do a bronze banter this week, right?
Yeah, I think given this is such a significant episode for the season, I think it might be worthwhile to eschew the bronze banter, because each one of these threads we have through the episode in terms of, this is a very structurally unusual episode, it's a very thematically resonant episode, and each one of these threads I think has a lot to get into in terms of what it means for the season, the characters and the show as a whole. And so essentially we have these in parallel and I believe in real time, is that correct? Scenes, conversations with dead friends, where each of the Scoobies, except for Xander, who can apparently get fucked, has a conversation with someone which both introduces the first as the big bad for the season, and as modus operandi, but also exposes some vulnerability that obviously within the character that the first is exploiting. So what's interesting obviously is what comes out of it and the pairings they have, but also how they choose to or actually no, to be fair, Webster is not the first, but except in the most general sense, he does talk about being connected to.
I was thinking about that. Yeah, the connection is that they are talking with dead people, and the literal translation of the title. I would say that Webster. I'm going to say Holden.
Holden, yeah.
I'm not sure what I would say Holden introduces the first in the sense that Spike is currently being manipulated by the first into attacking people and siring them or drinking from them, and that is I think there is a connection there. I'm not sure if it's maybe textual or if it's maybe just a fan connection I'm making there, but so I think the connecting tissue is literally conversations with dead people, and three of the storylines are about talking to the first.
You don't think that the Spike's siring and the feeding is connected to the first? I think that's kind of directly what he's...
Oh no, sorry, I was saying it was manipulated by the first, specifically,
You're saying you thought maybe it was fan theory.
Oh no, yeah, so I'm just saying I'm not sure if... I don't know if they sat down to write this and said, oh, we're going to give them all a connection to the first in this episode.
Oh, sure.
I think that connection there might be a tiny bit tenuous.
Yeah.
Realistically, though, I think what's interesting is that a lot of people denote the Spike scene as being a separate storyline, a fifth thread. I would see it as a part of Buffy's storyline. I think it is the background context to which Buffy's stuff is happening. I think he's voiceless in this episode because he is part of Buffy's story, not part of his own.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if you're going to have the theme of conversations with dead people and having him specifically muted through all of his scenes makes it a kind of a visual parallel to what Hogan was talking about. But to be fair, if Hogan does talk to Buffy in a general sense, but maybe in a more pointed sense, given the context that he feels connected to some great all-devouring evil that would rise up from below. So maybe if we want to, will we start off with the Buffy Hogan conversation? Maybe.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start.
So I want to.
Let's talk about the format a little bit first. Actually, that might be interesting. So this episode is quite unusual in the format. It's noted as being one of the only 2 episodes where the title appears on screen. This title appeared in quotation marks, which I thought was interesting. It kind of felt like a treatise or an essay almost. Its presentation, and also starts with the time and date, or the other way around, which denoted as being happening at the same time as the episode initially aired, and date as initially aired, which was 8:01 p.m. on the 12th of November 2002. Which I think is very cool as a format. Yeah, it's in real time, as we said, so it's in some ways quite a nice challenging format for the writers. You know, that you have 4 separate storylines. They're all quite limited in how much can actually happen in them, and you kind of have to do a lot with like a little.
Yeah, and I think quite a challenge there as well. Like, I definitely agree with that, and I think adding to that is it is an ensemble show, and you've specifically isolated your characters from their usual banter, and sometimes that can work really well, and sometimes you get Joey the TV show.
Yeah.
So I think the fact, again, a strength of the show is the fact that they can all carry and grow in their own scenes in kind of very, very interesting ways. It's also very literary. Like this is like a play. This is like a one act kind of television drama. Like there's an intentionality sometimes to structure, which is quite pleasing.
Yeah, I think this episode's often forgotten in the Buffy special episodes list. You have your Hush being the obvious one, Restless. I would say also very clearly Once More with Feeling, but those kind of like or the Zeppo I think is probably very much up there. But those convention breaking episodes, this is rarely mentioned in that list. So
Superstar
100%. I think this episode very much belongs in that same tradition, where the style and format are intentional and broken and denoted as being straying.
Yeah, and I think a very common theme with special episodes of Buffy is that like there's this concept that the world of Buffy is malleable and the reality is malleable, and that magic is essentially will-made force. So often these episodes, their format is actually driven by the in-universe reason to some degree.
Hush or Once More Feeling being obvious examples of that.
Superstar. And in this you have I still am willing to take the camp that the first is dividing them, and the aim of the first is to divide and destroy.
Yeah. And
in this they're very forcibly kind of attacked on an individual basis. Yeah, and as I said, kind of each one of those interactions is very different in both its tone, texture, and intent in terms of what's happening in it.
It's an interesting one as well because it kind of, I think one of the things that we might tend to overlook, and I think it's not something I've read very widely for this episode, but I think that this season very much explores the difference between, obviously everyone writes about this, but the differences between adults dealing with situations and children. Which is highlighted by Buffy and co now being adults in a similar context to which they were children dealing with difficulty, i.e. the school. But in this episode, you see 2 adults in Willow and Buffy who are faced with this challenge, which is to deal with an evil or see through something, and both of them succeed. Very much so. Willow succeeds in having more strength of character than to believe what the first is telling her through Cassie about Tara, and Buffy sees through the kind of temptation to submit her I don't know, her selfhood to the Holden situation, I would say. And Dawn, I think, fails, unfortunately. She has a lot of strength of character, but she's ready to believe a very sad thing, which is that Buffy won't choose her. And that's kind of where the episode leaves us. But it's very interesting in the sense that, like, yeah, it's definitely it begins the context of the season, which is separation and division, and then, you know, the ultimate point of the season being unity and shared power, which is so cool.
Yeah, it's a great building note, and I think that there's a lot of delivery of character in terms of how they interact. So even just taking an overview, like, what I think is, okay, working backwards, I think the Dawn stuff and giving her the opportunity to have a scene where she fully is by herself is actually a great character study for her, because the initial parts where she, before everything starts to go off the rails, she displays a lot of levity and a lot of likability, but the fact that she stands her ground and wants to, you know, objectively one of the more terrifying scenes, I think, in all of Buffy is this home invasion. You know, it's one of a couple of things between this and Angel I've noticed. Like, this was the era when I was watching on TV as a little lad where I was like, I can't watch this anymore, it's too scary. And part of it was this scene with Dawn.
Absolutely. So I think what I think is let's we said we talked about Buffy. Should we talk about Dawn first then, just given we're on the point?
Yeah, I think maybe Dawn is maybe the lightest in some ways.
It's the least text, as in, you know, there's very little dialogue in Dawn's section, highlighting her isolation, really. Yeah.
So to start off with, if nothing else, it is a classic horror slasher setting. It is the essentially the babysitter vibe,
and opening up on the phone is very much a reference to Scream, for sure.
Scream, but also I think what Scream is referencing, which might also be relevant here, is Black Christmas.
Oh yeah.
And any of that spate of related horrors in that era, which was like the call is coming from inside the house, that kind of thing. And I think,
which you haven't seen, right?
I've seen unfortunately I've seen the revival of Black Christmas.
We should watch the original Black Christmas. It's not brilliant, but it's so much fun.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff is foundational. And there's bits of Halloween in there, which, for sure. You know, and watching the old horror film on TV with a marshmallow and then not being able to turn off the horror, like, all of that is very, like, she's been terrorized by a killer kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. The the levity of the beginning, I think, very much calls that. But I think what's interesting is that the episode, the Dawn section, goes beyond the initial horror. I think it goes into a genuinely deeply traumatizing space. I think the Dawn is singled out as being the most vulnerable of the group and the most liable to be open to
force, in a way, like just straight up terror.
Yeah, and what's really sad is that it really feels so. The text of what actually happens to Dawn is that she's at home, she's watching movies, horror movies, which is funny because this is aired just after Halloween. She orders some pizza after Buffy says not to. There's a really genuinely hilarious line where she spills some pizza sauce on one of Buffy's jumpers and says, "Oh no, it's fine. She'll just think it's blood," which she does in a future episode. And then she's on the phone to Kit, who's from the first episode of the season, and she starts to hear banging. And
I love how with the banging, like, it sounds like someone trying to put their foot through the front door, and she's like, "I think I hear banging somewhere." Yeah. It's like it's very obvious. Yeah.
And things like quickly escalate where she you know, open the door. There's a gust blowing her backwards. There is things start happening, like she unplugs the TV, or she turns off the TV turns itself on, she unplugs it continues to play. She starts like her mother starts appearing on the couch behind her, dead.
There's a very quick jump cut where she bends down, like you expect these things, but she bends down and sits up so quickly, and then immediately Joyce is lying in the position she was found on the couch, and it was
same clothes as well.
Same clothes, and it was quite shocking. I was like, I didn't think it was going to come in so hard and so fast. Yeah.
And that escalates to a point where Dawn is then, like, very much just the house is exploding around her. She is desperately trying to do a spell to ward off the evil spirit, which unfortunately you'd have to imagine does actually play into the first plan to let her feel like she's won to some degree. She's visited by the, like, apparent angel of Joyce. who tells her Buffy's not going to choose you. Is that what she says? Choose you or protect you?
Yeah, like things are going to get more difficult and Buffy won't choose you.
Yeah, which is heartbreaking, and Dawn is just left weeping in her, like saying please don't go, in her sitting room with the whole place destroyed. Absolutely
trash. Like I don't know how they fix it after this.
Yeah, and she's just emotionally traumatized, like again. What I think is really notable about that is that it's so funny because like Dawn is just seen as so unlikable. And you have to ask why people hate teenage girls, because when they're not presented as adults. Because Buffy was presented as a mini adult, essentially, when she appears first in season 1. She's not a child. Whereas Dawn is much more appropriately framed as a kind of goofy child, as a character, while being the same age. Like, I mean, I would suggest that's probably more accurate as to what a 16-year-old is like. I think she's 16 at this point, right?
Yeah, I think like 15 or 16, but I think she actually shows a great presence of mind and responsibility and strength of character for a 16-year-old.
Yeah, she tries to contact Buffy. Buffy has dropped her phone. She tries to communicate, and once she's done that, she then tries to like ward it off herself by like using what little spells she knows, and does so with great gusto. Yeah, you know.
I think at the moment of real Summer's strength there is that she can go and she stays because she's like, no, this is into her understanding. She says, "This is my mother. I'm not going."
And this is my. I think she said, "This is my house." I think, does she?
No, it's my mother.
Okay.
Yeah, specifically because her understanding, and none of this I think is actually true. I think it's all a farce on the first part, but that the creature is hurting Joyce or stopping her from manifesting.
Yeah, she asks her to communicate with. She tries to communicate with Joyce, and she says like, you know, are you okay? And the thing bangs twice for no, and like, you know, are you being hurt? Like, yes, and stuff like this. It's it's a great moment of strength for Dawn, and I think it's all a farce and a way to manipulate her in a very, very disturbing way.
Yeah, and one of the cut lines in this episode from the interaction with the first as Joyce is Dawn says, "Oh, you know, they told me I wouldn't be able to bring you back," and Joyce, quote unquote, says, "Well, maybe I'm the first."
So good. They should let that in.
Yeah, I think it would be effective, particularly since you don't know who
the first it is. The phrase "the first" hasn't been used.
The first isn't like a significant phrase. Yeah,
I think it'd be a little dark to have Christine Sutherland be the first person to say "the first," though.
I kind of love it though.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah, and like Dawn get completely isolated, has no real interactions with any people or things, and you know, a lot of it is just her surviving this. So yeah, I think this episode really for Dawn added to me like, yeah, I like Dawn's great. Yeah.
And what's notable as well is like, obviously Anthony Stewart Head is not present at this point in the season. I think if they wanted to, they could have brought him back early to do a vignette in this episode. They didn't. Xander was. They had like alternative options as to what they would potentially do for the different characters. Xander could have. They were talking about Xander talking with Eric Balfour, who plays Jesse in episode 1 and 2. I noted a second name, but I can't remember now. But
Anya and Halfrick.
Halfrick.
Halfrick, I think, would have lacked impact, to be honest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Both those characters arrive in Buffy far before Dawn. They're much less established, much more liked at this point than Dawn, and neither of those things would have been in any way impactful versus what actually happens here with Dawn.
I think if you were I don't know if this is bad writing, but if Jaws was there, I feel like the impulse might have been to have pairing it with Jenny Calendar, because the first has manifested as Jenny Calendar,
which would be unnecessary, I think, ultimately.
And also, if I remember correctly, I think she's no longer acting, that actor.
Oh yeah, no, she isn't. And she I think she didn't like that she had to
play the devil, basically.
The devil in the original episode. Yeah.
And then maybe we might have a look at Willow and
Cassie.
We're going to have to come up with a shorthand for referring to the first as someone. Well,
for now, the first is playing or is taking the form of Cassie, so we're going to refer to her as Cassie. It's no big deal. So yeah, I think that's going to have to be the thing going forward. It's just like, listen, we'll denote when they're talking to the first, but if they're presenting as a certain person, it's usually easiest to refer to
the first is Cassie, hereafter referred to as
exactly
Cassie. Yeah.
Asterisk heretofore referred to as Cassie. So Willow is in UC Sunnydale. She is studying.
Still in college.
I know.
I'm actually shocked that UC Sunnydale stretches into the show so far beyond season 4. I didn't take that in at all.
Yeah, I wonder what the last appearance is going to be of it. Presumably later in the season.
Well, it'll be an aerial shot and chosen of it collapsing.
It's possible. So Willow is studying late at night. She's alone in the library. And Cassie appears, and Willow immediately recognizes Cassie from having been on her MySpace page, and says, you're dead. What? WTF?
She's like, I know you from Cassie Newton.geocities.org.
So they have a conversation. Cassie kind of quickly alludes to the fact that she is communicating for Tara. Amber Benson was supposed to return for this episode, or the plan was for her to return. Amber Benson has said that she didn't want to play Tara evil. And the writers have said that Amber Benson was not available. So who will ever truly know?
They're actually, let me trawl my memory. I believe that there is so I mentioned before that there's a couple, I think 2 Buffy video games which focus on the first as the big bag, and this was actually one of them was actually released before season 7, so it's just like this is a fertile ground. And there's a prequel comic book to it where various so it's like a Wishverse type thing. It's various people from different alternate timelines pulled in, and one of them is a vampire version of Tara, and it's actually the only time that in the wider Buffy canon that Tara is portrayed either as evil and or as a villain, or as a vampire. Pardon me, sorry. So that's what I was thinking. That's what I would think that evil Tara would be akin to.
Yeah. So she says a bunch of quite, I'm going to say triggering phrases, and I do mean that genuinely as a traumatic, trigger thing. So things like, remember when I sang to you on the bridge, and strong like an Amazon and stuff like this, which were phrases that they use with each other, which is very upsetting. What I thought about this episode was nice is that it actually genuinely does bring Tara back into the conversation in a way that previous episodes have been reluctant to, except for episode 4 of the season, which I can't even remember which one it was, where she visits the grave. Tara has been mostly written out of the narrative. Coming back here and saying, showing a Willow who and having Willow's storyline in this episode, a confrontation of grief and a manipulation of her grief, I think is appropriate. Not appropriate to do, but appropriate for the narrative to explore. Go on.
There's a lot of things I like about this interaction. One is, I think it's great that the actor who played Cassie got to play. These are 2 strong episodes for that character, and they're different, obviously, characters technically, but she's a different portrayal entirely, and particularly when the first breaks, essentially, and it's 2 great performances for that actor. But also, if you rush me and say think of who the first is very quickly, I'd probably think of Cassie.
Me too.
That's kind of like the because it's quite it's most descriptive to this point. And often
the most voiced, I would say, of I think this is the first instance of the first communicating with a character as the first since Amends.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I also noticed that it's a great conversation around kind of grief. It's a conversation around how where she sees potentially Willow's weaknesses, and that she needs to take it needs to take Willow off the board, and Willow having matured enough to be like, no, I don't think I should stop cold turkey. But also Willow's the first one to realize that something is wrong.
Yeah,
she when Cassie,
which is the only one who realizes what's wrong, in the sense that Dawn doesn't and Andrew doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it kind of in the whole season, she's the one who when the first tries to provoke Willow to kill herself to be with Tara, there's this immediate moment where Tara's Willow's who are you? Because you're not sent by Tara. Yeah. Which I think is really true that Willow would not fall into a pit of grief about that. She'd be like, no, this was sorry, what? Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. She's ready to believe that she might have to give up magic for a moment. Because if Tara's saying what you could do, you need to not use magic in this situation, she's really battling against this, because she's Giles has told me that it's not a great idea, that I can, not using black magic is the appropriate one. Anyway, from the beginning, it's also quite like a sinister conversation. Cassie says to her that she says, why hasn't Tara come to visit me herself, essentially? And Cassie says, well, it's because of all the people you killed, which Willow is ready to believe, which is like quite upsetting in lots of ways, that she, in that moment is like, yeah, okay, of course I'm, there's a level of punishment that is appropriate for me that, maybe in another situation I would have been able to see my dead girlfriend who caused me to go into such a spiral of grief that I nearly destroyed the world. One thing I found really notable is that Willow very much agrees with our assessment of what happened to her in season 6 versus the text of kind of what happens, where the dark spirit basically just takes over, and she's kind of not responsible hugely for what happens after a certain point. What she says is when Cassie says to her that she has essentially she has to give up the dark magic, or all magic, basically, because she will kill our friends. She says well, no, the problem was I was using dark magic and I let it take over me, essentially, and I let it take over my personality. She says I am the magic, what she says is, I am the power, it's in me. Which basically is integration of the self. It's connecting to, not saying that magic is this thing that you can get addicted to. It's saying that she has used it for her personal gains, and that she needs to recontextualize how she's approaching it, which is more responsible, which is just interesting. So yeah, as we kind of noted there, the first very much puts its cards on the table in this episode, and communicates why it needs Willow to not be present for the rest of the season. It's suggesting that Willow will turn this dark evil, and it doesn't go after Buffy first in terms of trying to take her off the playing field. It goes after Willow and tries to, and it just tortures Dawn and opens her up to being manipulated further. Whereas Willow is very much told, we need to get rid of you now, essentially, because Willow is ultimately the along with Buffy together, they are completely rooted. There should be power and make the fight against evil possible through girl power.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And it is Willow and Buffy together are the ones who really actualize the conclusion of the season. Yeah. Which becomes quite a niche, because the aim of the first, I think, is really initially introduced here in that conversation with Cassie, is to no longer balance good and evil, but to end the lying, and specifically end the Slayer lying and everything that it implies. And Willow and Buffy kind of at the end of the season go, okay, yeah, we'll end the Slayer line, and we'll start a new one, essentially. That's kind of the denouement of it. Well, they end the Slayer line and create a Slayer net. Yes, exactly. The question being I wonder if from then on it will potentials continue to be called into the world. Anyway, I think so. Yeah, I think so. Personally, it's interesting. Yeah. So will we have a look at Andrew and Jonathan, perhaps? For sure. For mayhaps. An unusual inclusion in this episode, but one that I think very much works. Yeah, so a mechanical inclusion, because they do actually instigate kind of the next phase we think of in season 7, which is the first in the seal dance guitar, which is going to be fun to have to say many times. The seal. I'm going to refer to that as the seal, yeah. And you have, I know that kind of in retrospect, people have some, I'm right in saying people have some affection for Andrew and how he kind of... People love Andrew, especially what he becomes later on this season. Yeah, up until now, he's still quite a jerk, pain in the ass, you know. He, particularly, he's probably the least, in many ways, some of the most complicit and least remorseful stuff out of the trio, and I would call people hell bitch and all this kind of stuff. But even here, he's I think it's quite poignant what happens with Jonathan's death in this episode, and Andrew is still quite bitter and quite there's a lot of misogyny and self-hatred and just negativity from Andrew. It's counterpointed by Jonathan, I think, in a really interesting way in this segment.
Yeah, so what Andrew says is like, "Can go back to the clink," essentially, and Jonathan says, "Maybe we can make things right," essentially, at the same time, which is like, you know, a genuinely, like, you know, remorseful person versus, like, I think Andrew's like, "Oh, maybe Buffy can protect us and
we can hang out at her house."
Yeah, and Jonathan is essentially saying, you know, maybe we can do kind of like better from what we've done already, essentially, which is, you know, appropriate for John. I think it's a good conclusion to Jonathan's character. Where who has his up and downs over the seasons, from, you know, kind of the manipulation of Superstar, the like constant bullying, the
suicidal,
exactly, yeah. The part where he obviously in season 3 where he's the person who gives Buffy the class protector umbrella, and then into season 6 where he like allows that kind of misogyny to like take over and take control of his kind of character, to bring him to this point where he says like, no, I've seen the error of my ways, and well, of course he has to get killed at that point, but I think it's a nice send off for him. Yeah,
absolutely. I think you know, if men are to be included in this show, they have to be there for a purpose, I think. Yeah. And with Jonathan, I think he's actually quite a good arc, in the sense of he is not perfect, and he's potentially not even necessarily a good person. He may have done more harm and contributed to more, you know, more. It may have contributed to more misogyny and violence and all that kind of stuff, but he demonstrates, despite that, capacity to learn, and his last moments are like ones of real emotional intelligence, where Andrew's like, well, no one cares, I was thinking about you, and he's like, yeah, but I still care about them. And that is incredibly poignant time for him to die in a pool of incredibly CGI blood. Yeah,
it's also like, you know, like a genuine communication of selflessness, which is important. It's an interesting segment. It's full of like quite well handled nerdy references. I was like, oh, I missed these a little bit. You know, some of them were kind of fun. You know, calling I keep trying to say Danny, calling Jonathan short round, which actually
it's definitely a reference to Indiana Jones.
Oh no, it definitely is. And I was like, you know, is there some like racist element to that reference? Because obviously the portrayal of that character in that movie is reasonably not okay race-wise.
I believe short round is just because he's short.
Yeah, I would believe it.
And he's a child. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, which is definitely enjoyable. I think what's really interesting is the kind of communication of how Warren is presented. So the storyline for them is they come back to Sunnydale from Mexico. They go to the high school. They're trying to do something which will get them in Buffy's good graces, essentially. That's how Andrew sees it. Warren sees it as doing something genuinely good. They uncover the seal. Andrew's...
I think you've conflated some names there. So Jonathan sees it as doing something good, and Andrew is... Yeah,
absolutely. Sorry. They are trying to find the seal. Andrew is continuously talking to Warren.
Which seal, sorry?
The seal of Xanathar and xanthan gum. And Warren is communicating with Andrew, shows him where the seal is. They dig up the seal, and then which I always thought was a very confusing phrase, because when people say you dig something up, often it's still buried, and it's like they've actually gone down.
Yeah,
and there's no upness of it anyway. And then Andrew kills Jonathan to spill his blood on the seal, and the seal starts glowing, and that's kind of where the episode ends. What I thought was really interesting is how the first communicates through Warren at the beginning of the episode, where like, you know, he is speaking with genuine alacrity with like geek topics, where Andrew's like, he is our last hope, and about Jonathan, because they're going to sacrifice him, and Warren says, no, there is another, which is obviously a Star Wars reference. And
he's almost like an idealized version of Warren who wants to pay attention to Andrew, because I don't think there was ever really more than like a couple of seconds where Warren actually listened to Andrew. So I do think it's fascinating that we see a couple of things. The first can be in multiple places at once, which is like, I think is really codified here. It manipulates people in different ways. And it's actually quite seamless at how it actually can integrate into being that, because if you really think about it, you have any other show where you have the big bad, legitimately in the scene cracking jokes about Star Wars and it not be like a jump the shark moment, but like it works in this context.
Yeah. Like if you told me before this season, and I had never seen it before, that the last season of Buffy will not have a corporeal big bad, that it is going to be all dead people who've ever been died, I'd have been like, it sounds bad, but it works. But what I found like one of the most jarring and upsetting moments of the episode is where they're looking for the entrance to the seal, and they can't find it, and Andrew sees Warren just standing silently, pale faced, like completely plain faced, in front of the door, and so he's like, "Oh, there it is," and it's just like it was really haunting, and very scary.
It was a good shot.
It was a really good shot.
It's actually quite a mix of different horror conventions in this episode, which works really well.
I think that's pretty much everything there is to say about the trio in that situation. What do you think?
The duo, it's it's really just operationalizing as such kind of the next phase of the first being able to put his plan into motion in terms of opening the seal and opening the hellmouth.
For sure.
And probably one of the climax of this whole experiment being the Hogan and Buffy exchange.
For sure. So, the context here is that Buffy is in the graveyard. The cold open is her seeing a hand push through the dirt and saying,
"A la Carrie,"
and saying, so the music actually is playing. The music at the beginning of the end of the episode is written by Joss Whedon along with a friend whose name I didn't note because I didn't bother. But what I thought was notable is one of the last line of the song before it cuts to the cold open, or the credits, is can I spend the night alone? And then Buffy says, "Here we go," and it's about to interact with Holden, which is call and response essentially. But so she sits in the graveyard for the night and talks and fights with Holden Webster, who is a Sunnydale student. We never saw him before in Sunnydale, which is fine. He kind of communicates that he knew who Buffy was and she didn't, and he's like, "No, it's fine. You were obviously dealing with your own shit there." So they kind of talk about that, and he's a psychology student, so he ends up psychoanalyzing her a bit, which is kind of funny, but also works.
And he's played by Jonathan M. Wigwart, who is one of those actors who has been in multiple Whedon properties. So he plays Tracy Smith in Firefly, but he also plays Knox, who plays a significant role in season 5 of Angel and is responsible for Fred's death in Angel.
He's actually, I find him very interesting as an actor because he's in this really wonderful TV movie called Wit with Emma Thompson from 2001, which was directed by Mike Nichols, which is about a woman who's dying of cancer. But it's probably one of my top 50 favorite movies, I would say. It is stunningly good. It is it's basically there are extended John Donne references in it. The main character is a John Donne scholar. And John Donne is a I was going to say romantic era poet, but I can't actually remember what years he wrote. I think it might have been the 18th century. But he wrote these very deeply complex poems, and one of them, she goes into the kind of the minutia of the kind of analysis around the punctuation in it, and it's stuck with me forever, to be honest.
Actually, people might be most aware of John Donne is probably popularising and perhaps originating the phrase "No man is an island," from the poem, the title poem "No man is an island." No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a cloud be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less. Yeah. So
the phrase that she breaks down a lot in this, and so basically the actor here was her doctor, and he appears quite a bit, but he hasn't really done much otherwise. But the phrase that she goes into in depth in wit is "and death shall be no more, death thou shalt die," which is a really beautiful little Catholic or Christian kind of communication.
All very pretty. So really we have the opportunity in this, I will say that I think his performance here is very charismatic, and he's a great Buffy character. He's absolutely able to, in the sense of let me reframe that, he's perfectly able to hold a Buffy style conversation.
I wonder why that is. It's because it's written by Joss Whedon, this section.
Yeah, 100%. And you still need to be able to deliver it, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And this is an opportunity between, it's actually probably one of the purest conversations in the show between her as a vampire slayer and a vampire who knows nothing more than the fact that he's a vampire.
Yeah.
And it's basically talking about that dynamic. She gets into him, basically talking to him about things that she can't talk to anyone else because she knows she has to kill him at the end.
Yeah.
And it's just delightfully dense in terms of that, because like that's a very poignant thing. She has some memory of this person, but she has had to demarcate in her head the fact that like people are not themselves once they're vampires, but that doesn't mean you necessarily have to be like. I think it's really interesting because I think she talks at one point when he pisses her off about having to kill him a little more than she would usually, and I actually think there's a real balancing act with her morally where she has to understand that he's not a person, but she also can't torture him, because that's bad for her and her role, if she started like taking off his fingers or something,
Yeah.
So I think about that a lot in terms of like they're fighting and they're talking.
An unusual choice of torture, but go on.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks.
Someone was torturing someone in a book I was listening to that way this morning, so that's why it's in my mind. And basically unpacking a very relevant theme for the season, which is like what separates her from her friends. Like she feels bad about the fact that she does think that she is different from them, that she is a slayer, that she has a responsibility that they will never understand, that can't be passed, that almost no one she's ever met has ever been able to understand this. And in some ways she is better than them. Some measurable ways she is more capable, more valuable on a certain scale. But she doesn't want to be like that.
Yeah, it's dealing with the difficulty of being the chosen one, not by choice. And
obviously what this comes to is she becomes not the chosen one. That's how she rewrites the rules of that, which is like what it's building towards.
It's a really nice conclusion. So it's really interesting. It's kind of talking about Buffy's sense of responsibility around everything, around her parents' divorce, around kind of her interactions with her friends, her perspective on her relationships. He kind of analyzes the fact that she has, gone out with these men who are impossible, and why she feels like unlovable essentially. And it's dense. It's not hugely anything that we haven't discussed in the podcast, I would say. Maybe, I don't know, was there anything there that you were like surprised to hear?
Nothing surprised, but I think it adds a layer to it when the character is aware of it and actually states, this is what I am feeling in the universe.
Oh, for sure.
Because like so much of season 6 and up until the start of season 7 was like, as we said, her feeling things and not being able to properly articulate them, and when she's such a verbal character, and that creates a sense of stagnation. It creates a sense of
arrested development,
atrophy, and being able to at least, which is obviously the purpose of this kind of dime store but still talk therapy that she's doing, is actually say, okay, put it in front of me, this is what I'm feeling, and now I can make actions around it by acknowledging it.
I know, and this episode very much does kind of like stretch outwards. This is the basis on which kind of like the rest of the season is built, and you can really feel it in her, the psychology actually discussed there for herself. I think even the fact that she's open to having this conversation in the first place in this episode denotes her adulthood. She is at a place where she's not fixed, but she's ready to learn, ready to be open to being fixed. I hope someday to be in that place myself. It's a good conversation. All building up to and throughout this, you see Spike picking up a woman at a bar, and
also I felt interestingly, even though he's not speaking, he acts very
normal.
He acts more like William. Yeah. More like just like he's
also not wearing very spiky clothes. He's wearing like dark clothes for sure, but it's like jeans and a dark denim jacket. I would say
he communicates just a shyness rather than a demureness.
Which is really interesting. And he brings her home he goes back to her house and then bites her, and that's kind of the conclusion. What I found very interesting as well about that is we then find out obviously that Holden has been sired by Spike, which is obviously a real betrayal for Buffy. And when she hears this, instead of like kind of entertaining him anymore, she's just like, okay, well, that's you done. Like he's like, we're going to have this grand battle and we're going to be nemesis, and
she just stakes him perfunctorily.
Yeah, exactly. She's just like, okay, well, this is done now.
Yeah.
And which obviously denotes like, just it communicates Buffy's power. But what I thought was interesting was Holden picked up by Spike for sex?
That's a very good point, actually.
Did Spike seduce Holden and bring him home?
Holden does say he has a girlfriend in college.
Well, that's what a lot of gays say.
He also talked a lot about Scott Hope, and seemed to know how Scott Hope had come out recently.
Yeah, who the Scott Hope who obviously it was in season 3 of Buffy when Buffy was trying to be a normal girl, and she goes out with him. Apparently, told everyone that she was gay, and he came out as gay afterwards. But people have suggested that's probably because the actor who's, I was going to say Fan Fabio, Fab something. He plays a character in Queer as Folk US around the same time, who goes out with I can't remember his name now. Nathan, I think his name is, the blonde boy, who's like underage when he. Actually, he's not underage in Queer as Folk US. I think he's of age in that. But they go out together, and there's some really like disturbing scenes where this guy is like he's like a queer activist, and he ends up like being like, yes, we should bring our own guns and exact like revenge, and it kind of deals with kind of that queer rage kind of thing, which is interesting but also bizarre. Anyway, so, or maybe that's not him. I think it might be a different character. I think he might be a violinist. I'm getting confused no matter what. Yeah, it's really interesting, like, dynamic. It's a very unusual set of scenes. It's also very good, I think.
Yeah, and I think it really it gives Buffy a great opportunity to expound on her character when it's not in opposition to someone else's usually quite like impatient desires. Like she's always accommodating other people and reacting to other people. Not that she's a reactive character, but like people are always pushing her, and this is just like this is like the most time, if we kind of take Hogan as not really being a person because he's a vampire, this is like the most time we see her having by herself in a long time.
It is. It's the most me time she gets. Should we move into the dusting, Joe?
Absolutely. Great.
I have some Buffy bits for you. So we've kind of mentioned a lot of them through the episode, but yeah, so it actually did win a Hugo, which is interesting. The monster that is straddling Joyce, or strangling her, maybe. There's only
straddling
flashes.
And kind of like oh god, there's a word for that, but like the way a witch would sit on your chest, and like
quite incubus-y.
Incubus-y, yeah.
Succubus is the woman. Incubus is the man.
Could be a succubus, isn't it?
Yeah, you never know with Joyce. But that is the Gnarl from Same Time, Same Place. But spray painted black, which is interesting. Christine Sutherland is the only actor who's appeared as a guest star in all 7 seasons as of this episode. It's the only episode with a specific time or date. And as we've noted, the Dawn's pizza stain will come back in the episode First Date. We'll talk about that then.
We'll talk about that pizza stain though.
I hope so. And Mark Field notes that while all 3 characters, all 3 of them get what they want. Buffy gets someone to talk to and to decompress with. Dawn gets to see Joyce, and Willow gets to talk to Tara. None of them actually turn out to be good for them. It's actually all turned out to be bad. He also notes that all the characters think they're connecting with someone, but they're not. You have Buffy thinking she's connecting to Holden, but she's not. You have Dawn thinking she's connecting to Joyce, Willow to Tara, Jonathan to Andrew, and Andrew to Warren. So no one's really, while this episode is about conversations with dead people, no one's really conversing. There's no connection being had here, which is quite interesting. And then I would just note that the image of Cassie dissolving into her own
unfolding her head,
like folding up into her own smile, is deeply disturbing imagery.
Yeah, I've actually put it in the episode show notes.
Good, I'm glad. Okay, do you have any Buffy bits for me there, Joe?
This might be the first time for some listeners to realise that there is actually a photo from the episode in every show note that we do. So if you want to do a deep dive in that. Do I have a Buffy Bits? We have another charming element of Andrew's personality where he says he went to Mexico, became Mexican, and everyone had to speak Mexicoan. I really enjoyed when Holden was asking, is there any definitive word on whether there's a god? And Buffy's like, it's kind of everything's either way. Here. In the Buffyverse, and her saying that she thinks the reason why her parents split up was because Hank cheated, which I don't think has ever been articulated before. Totally makes sense. And I also enjoyed, as well, Jonathan or Andrew saying to Warren's like, my more powerful than you strike me down more powerful than you ever imagine, and you'd be like, you think Willow will kill me too so I can get powerful? Fucking idiot. Like,
yeah, he really truly is. Also, actually, one more note, one of the pieces of writing on the wall when Dawn is being tortured is "Mother's milk is red today." What the fuck?
Yeah, it's just spooky.
Yeah. Okay. Some fashion notes for you, and I'm able to take fashion notes again because my hand is working again, which is really nice. I just note here is like, it eats you starting with your bottom, which Andrew says to Jonathan, which I would have thought was the other way around personally. But
it eats you starting with you, bottom.
I quite like Buffy's cable knit sweater. It's quite nice. It has a turtleneck, which is okay. It's grey. She's also wearing a nice denim jacket and a very droopy cross necklace. Don't like the shirt that Dawn is wearing. It's kind of like pleated unnecessarily, I thought. Holden is wearing a blue shirt with his suit, which he's been buried in, and it looks crap.
Now, it's not his fault because he was, families burying people like that. It's like it wasn't his choice. Yeah,
it's true. I quite like the braids in Buffy's hair, which I have to presume are a holdover from her wedding, but they actually look quite nice in this episode, even they didn't look great in the previous one. And then I just noted that Spike's clothes are a bit more casual than usual, which is unusual, which is notable. But otherwise, there's not really many fashion notes to be had here.
Yeah, Joyce looks radiant as an angel.
Oh God, just beautiful
in pure white. What more can you ask for there?
Literally nothing. I have one of my notes is Christine Sutherland, the literal angel.
Okay, do you want to bring us in for a landing with a?
Well, let's do some. What's the death count here for us? For this episode?
Gosh, is there anything? Oh, the lady dies.
The lady dies. So does.
So Spike savages the girl he brings home. Mm-hmm. Technically Holden
Webster just gets spiced.
I actually kept trying to say Hogan Caulfield, but Hogan Webster dies and comes back and gets staked. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we've known staking as being
absolutely before. The staking counts there as well. I think that might be it.
Bit of a notable one here too, Joel. That you're missing out on.
I'm trying to do this off the dome piece.
How many characters are in this episode?
And Jonathan Livingston,
yeah, there we go,
significant recurring character, mm-hmm. And his less than average amount of blood is draining out of him on the seal of Dan's Lothar, stabbed by Tucker's brother. Yeah,
Tucker's brother. Okay, and then a rating. Do you have a rating for me, Joel?
Yeah, I'm going to say 9.7 awkward conversations with people you went to school with, and you pretend that you know who they are when they say, "Oh, yeah, how have you been?" But you don't actually know who they are, and then you're stuck, and then sometimes you have to actually say, "No, I'm sorry, I was lying."
I really hope no one's noting these ratings and the context.
I'm very sorry to the superfans.
Tell me more.
I think it's an exceptional episode. I think that you're right, I think it should go in the canon there with things like Hush and Restless and Once More a Feeling. Maybe not as flashy, but each section works. Each has menace, each has horror, each has great character development, and it immediately makes you think, oh fuck, what is this season going to be about? And I love that.
Yeah, it's full of menace. I'm going to give this episode 9.5 microwaved marshmallows out of 10. Yeah, I love it. I love this episode. It's maybe my favorite episode of season 7. We'll see. I think I gave Selfless like 9.2. I'm comfortable with that still. But we'll see how it kind of goes from here. But I love this episode very deeply. I think it's wonderful. I think it's very, very well done. I think it's very notable. I think it's up there with, it obviously doesn't challenge your body's Restless or anything like that. But I think it...
The Boggie's another one that breaks convention.
I just thought that, yeah. Or Passion or anything like that. But it's close to... Or it's certainly the same league. Is it it's the same... It's losing that league, but it's in the same league. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's move on to the Cordelia Chase.
Yeah, so we must... Well, actually, no. I think I can very succinctly address this episode of Cordelia Chase. I think it's a pretty good episode.
Yeah.
It actually echoes this episode of Buffy because it is about the big bad being properly introduced and escalation. So it's a very focused episode for that reason. Now a lot of it happens very quickly, but essentially earlier in the season, when Lauren had scanned Cordelia's mind, there was some horrible prophecy or information there that he got burdened with. Wolfram and Herc sucked that out of his head and been trying to decode it to figure out what is coming. and Cordelia, who is now Jasmine. So maybe we should start referring to her as Jasmine. Or is this the same problem? Actually, we actually have a similar theme there, where Jasmine is masquerading as Cordelia, and we have the first masquerading as various characters. Is with Conger, I think, is this the episode where they have sex, or was that last episode?
Yeah, this is the episode, the end of the episode.
And the episode they have sex, gross. And she goes and leads them to basically where the beast, which is perceived to be the big bad, is coming through. So in a very short amount of time, they kind of get all this information from Wolf and Hirsch, and everyone, Wesley comes back, they get all their stuff together, and they're like, we have to figure out what this is prophesying, and they're like, it's happening now, like in the next couple of minutes. So bergs start to fall out of the sky and smash into the hotel. There's attacks all over the city that form a pattern, which at the middle of the pattern is essentially where the beast is going to perform its ritual. The beast is this like enormous like Lucifer looking demon, covered entirely in metal and lava, very imposing, great character work, and it's just incredibly physically imposing and threatening. And what it really culminates in is, again, this escalation that it's happening, something is coming, something is happening now. And it ends with, on this rooftop,
it comes back in the place where Darla gave birth to Connor as well, which is notable.
Very significantly, yeah. So where the beast comes through is where Connor was birthed from Darla. But on the roof of this, where all this patterns converge on the roof, the beast has slaughtered all these people and put them in the pattern of the alchemical symbol for fire. And the angel gang confront him. Conger tries to fight him first and has the shit kicked out of him, and has his ribs broken and all that. So there's all this kind of stuff about how is he actually able to fight a damn fear like Conger and all that kind of stuff. And then you have a fight scene with all of the angel gang and the beast, which is it actually holds up okay, I think. I thought it was the coolest thing I've ever seen at the time.
I'm sure.
But basically all five of them try to fight the beast at the same time. It goes into slow motion.
I don't think Fred is there, is she? I think Fred might be...
She might be there. She might just be throwing rocks or something.
I thought she was like waylaid by this point, because she is she's not talking. Obviously her and Gunn are not on great terms at the moment. So she and yeah, that's kind of one of the plot points, is that her and Gunn are not talking. The fight, one of the most fun parts of it for me was, like, I thought it was actually like genuinely good fun when Wesley like uses his crossbow and is like, oh, this isn't working, and just pulls out a couple of guns and is like, I'll just shoot you instead.
I thought that was very notable. So you have Angel fighting with a sword, he can't fight the beast, he gets battered as well. I was saying that this was today, if this was something like The Boys or Invincible, like people would be getting their like limbs torn off in this scene. But yeah, so Wesley tries the crossbow, he takes out 2 Colt 45s and empties them Max Payne style at the beast. And then when that doesn't work, he pulls out a double barrel shotgun. And I actually think if Wesley's quite a cool character. Like he's very, his demon hunting thing is like, we're all about the drama. He's like, let me just take a gun and shoot it. It actually works a lot of the time. And then you have Angel try to stake the beast in the eye, and he catches the stake, and you see the beast has like goat-like eyes, and then he performs the ritual and flies into the sky. I think he might just leap or whatever
after he throws Angel off the side of the building.
And then fire starts to rain down Los Angeles. So like, it's hokey as all hell, but like it's quite direct in terms of an episode, and it is quite threatening. And then it turns out that the beast is actually just the servant of the ultimate god, that kind of thing. Jasmine. So it was 7 fail feminist gestures.
I would say it would easily get an 8, in the sense it was really good fun, except for the fact that the conclusion is Cordelia and Connor sleeping together, who at this point it's Jasmine, cool. Same time, there's no need to portray that.
There's no need.
No one wants to see that. No, like it doesn't add any positivity to anything. It just makes my stomach turn.
Yeah, but I had fun watching this episode of Angel. I'd say that much.
Yeah, I would say that too. So I'm going to go for 7 fail feminist gestures as well.
Great. So folks, thanks for joining us for this omnibus episode of Buffy Boys. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please let us know. Tell your friends. Tell the ghost you can see just out of the corner of your eye. If you turn now, do you see it moving?
Joel's been listening to a lot of Night Vale.
I have. And we will see you next time, right here on Buffy Boys.
That's where we'll see you. Bye.
See you.
Bye.